What's up, everybody? How many of y'all have actually read the Old Testament? Well, I can't say that I have read every bit of it, but I have read the first five straight through, and those are the only five books that the Judeans use at all for the Torah. And I highly recommend reading those five books with an open mind. Just forget all your preconceived notions. It's a little difficult to understand in the King James archaic English, so NLV might be a little easier, New Living Version. But I'm going to do a video coming up about that, especially Exodus. I'm just kind of softening the blow for some people. But I had read a book back in the 90s, maybe 2000s, that made me reread the Bible, or at least the Torah, and you might be really surprised at what you read there. Like how upon the Exodus from Egypt, the Israelites followed a pillar of smoke through the desert that at night became a pillar of fire that they could all see by. And then there are extremely accurate dimensions by which a tabernacle had to be built so that each night this pillar of smoke and fire could descend and land there. And then there were extremely precise instructions about the priests and how they had to be cleansed and ritually bathed and then anointed in oil and covered head to toe to be allowed within the presence of God. And if you're really paying attention, you'll learn that it wasn't just for the protection of the priests, which it was, but also for the protection of God, I believe. Yeast being one of the things that cannot be within the presence of God in any way, shape, or form. If you eat yeast at all and go before the presence of God, that's one of the worst sins you could commit. This is why they still have traditions of unleavened bread. So that's all I'm going to say about it for now. But what image does that conjure up in your mind? I'll just leave you to that one. We're going to jump forward to the book of Job, where when God is having a conversation with Job, he flat out describes a dragon. So I guess if there's ever any question about whether or not physical dragons ever existed, well, God said that there was. But I think this is like I was talking about in the demons video. I think we have the same word describing different things. Just like a demon can be describing an evil spirit that inhabits someone's body, I think at one time there were grotesque monsters on Earth that people called demons. Same with dragons. I think there were physical dragons, but also there have been cosmic cataclysms and aerial phenomena with, streaks of fire shooting across the sky that they called dragons. Our language today is pretty evolved and descriptive, as to where used to you would just have to use like the closest word that describes what you're trying to portray. So Job 41 is where he describes the dragon, but I want to start at 36 and just throw some of the stuff out here. And I'm going to use the NLV just for ease of understanding. And this starts off with Job and Elihu having a conversation. It says, well, how great is God? It's beyond our understanding. The number of his years are past finding out. Now, I'm going to interject that I don't see the history of the Israelites and the history of the Sumerians and the Egyptians as all these totally different events. They're all describing the same things. And if you heard of the Sumerian kings list, where the kings lived for hundreds of thousands of years, that just conjures an image when I hear the number of his years are past finding out. He draws up the drops of water, which he distills as rain into the streams. The clouds pour down their moisture, and abundant showers fall on mankind. Who can understand how he spreads out the clouds, how he thunders from his pavilion? NLV uses the term from his pavilion. King James Version says, can any understand the spreading of the clouds or the noise of his tabernacle? The same word described to use the tent that the pillar of flame and smoke descended onto nightly. Only this is loud and rumbling. So either way you look at this, doesn't that sound like a physical object? So back to NLV. He thunders from his pavilion. See how he scatters his lightning about him, bathing the depths of the sea? This is the way he governs the nations and provides food in abundance. Which is saying that he controls the rain and he can make it rain and food will grow. Or if you piss him off, he fills his hands with lightning and commands it to strike its mark. His thunder announces the coming storm. Even cattle make known his approach. So you can hear this thundering approach of his pavilion. Job says, "At this my heart pounds and leaps from its place. Listen to the roar of his voice, the rumbling that comes from his mouth." God's voice thunders in marvelous ways. He does great things beyond our understanding. He says to the snow, "Fall on earth," and to the rain shower, "Be a mighty downpour," so that everyone he has made knows his work. He stops all people from their labor. The animals take cover. He loads the clouds with moisture. At his direction, they swirl around over the face of the whole earth to do whatever he commands them. He brings the clouds to punish people or to water his earth and show his love. So then, I guess this is Elihu responding. He says, "Listen to this, Job. Stop and consider God's wonders. How do you know how God controls the clouds and makes his lightning flash? Do you know how the clouds hang poised? Can you join him in spreading out the skies, hard as a mirror of cast bronze?" So this is a conversation of two people talking about a flying tent that controls the weather. And for the Christians that are telling me that I'm speaking absolute blasphemy here, I am just reading what the Old Testament says. But I'll just say that I've had somewhat of a Gnostic point of view for a long time. I don't know about anything that they say lies beyond the physical veil. But I'll just tell you, Jesus did not think very highly of the law of Moses. Go read what he says about the Pharisees. He says that I have come to the den of vipers. When mentioning the Gentile nations, Jesus didn't seem to have much concern about them. It was the leaven of the Pharisees that you should be aware of. And when Jesus prayed, he didn't say, "O Yahweh who art in heaven." He said, "Our Father who art in heaven." And Jesus had the power to cast out demons, so he has control over the spiritual world. So don't take anything I'm saying as a knock against Christianity or Jesus. This is just an evaluation of what the Old Testament says. God, Yahweh of the Old Testament, had a tabernacle in the sky that could control the weather and even just stop the movement of the clouds as if it were a mirror of cast bronze. But none of this is just cut and dried, easy to understand, because then God spoke to Job out of the storm. He tells Job, "Brace yourself like a man, and I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Who laid the cornerstone while the morning stars sang together and all of the angels shouted for joy? Who shut up the seas behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garments and wrapped it in thick darkness, when I fixed limits for it and said, 'This far you may come and no further. This is where your proud waves halt.' If you journeyed to the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep, have the gates of death been shown to you? Tell me if you know all this." So look, I'm just a mere mortal, dumb human trying to figure out what this realm is all about, reading writings from people from thousands of years ago. This is Ruckus trying to figure out why those doggies are as tall as I am. Ruckus always gets the likes, so hit that button for him. But if I combine all this with what I've heard about the Anunnaki and all of that, and you need to understand who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, supposedly. Moses. Who educated Moses? The ancient Egyptians. He was raised as a prince of Egypt, royalty. So the Sumerian creation story is known as Eridu Genesis, and then the creation story of the Bible is known as Genesis, the story of the creation of this world. Well, Eridu Genesis speaks of beings that have lifespans of hundreds of thousands of years. And guess what? They've only been gone for, 3,000 to 5,000 years? So I'm guessing that Enki and Enlil and all of them are still alive. And when you know the Sumerian story and you combine it with the biblical story, it really does seem like they came here and terraformed Earth. There, I said it. Now, I don't know if they came here from other planets or if they came here from other dimensions. There are all these old grimoires like the Sworn Book of Hieronymus, where you can conjure spirits, beings of some form or another, to do your bidding if you do it correctly. Though I highly doubt any of this actually works in English, I would say that it has to be done in the proper language. And honestly, this is just the curse of the pursuit of knowledge. The more answers you find, the more questions you come up with. Some things do become clearer. I think the history of the last 1,000 years or so finally makes some sense to me, but there's still a lot of things I just don't understand. But I'm really just kind of going into this to ease the blow for some people when I get to my grand finale and talk about the Exodus story, which we'll get there. But for now, whoever did create this world did create dragons. Because in the conversation between God and Job about whether or not you should obey the will of the Lord, God says this: can you pull in Leviathan? And they're just using the name Leviathan for dragon here. Evidently, it lives in the ocean or water. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it keep begging you for mercy? It continues on like this for a couple stanzas, and then it says, well, I will not fail to speak of the Leviathan's limbs, for its strengths and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Who dares open its mouth, open the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together, each is so close to the next that no air can pass between them. Lord of the Rings, anyone, where, somebody knows the secret weak spot of the dragon where it's missing a chink of armor? Its snorting throws out flashes of light, its eyes are like the rays of dawn, flames stream forth from its mouth, sparks of fire shoot out, smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from its mouth. Strength resides in its neck, dismay goes before it. When it rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before its thrashing. The sword that reaches it has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron it treats like straw, and bronze like rotten wood. Arrows do not make it flee. Sling stones are like chaff to it. Club seems to it but a piece of straw. It laughs at the rattling of the lance. Its undersides are jagged pot shards, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sledge. It makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron, and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. It leaves a glistening wake behind it. One would think that the deep had white hair. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature without fear. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is king over all that are proud. So that is quite unmistakably what we would call a dragon. And that's coming directly from what we call God. So anybody who's really interested in reading some crazy ancient stories, I suggest you actually read the Old Testament. It's very monotonous and redundant. I had to skip a lot of stanzas in between there because they'll describe the same thing over and over. But when you take the 30,000-foot view of what they're describing in the Old Testament, you might have a different view of things than what redactionists and priests have told you about it. And you should definitely keep in mind that for hundreds of years, the Church of Rome were the only ones allowed to read any of this. If you were caught with a Bible, that was heresy, punishable by, And for some reason, it was only in Latin. Well, the Old Testament is written in Hebrew. The New Testament is written in Greek. There never was an original Latin form of it. And it was translated into Latin during a time when no one spoke Latin. So I definitely have many reasons to question authority. So you guys can go check it out, or you can just wait till I get around to the video on it, and I'll give you my breakdown of it that I've had for 20 years. And honestly, I've learned a lot of things that because of my upbringing, I was just like, no, that can't possibly be right. But the more I study things, then I'm like, how can that not be right? And what I've learned has left me in a bit of a moral quandary, and I'll just leave it at that. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you on the next one. Static out.